Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome to another live stream with Montana Outdoor Science School. My name is Melanie. I am an instructor with Moss, and today's subject is all about turtles. If you do have any questions throughout this video, feel free to type into the comment section. I'm happy to answer any questions. We've also got someone on hand there and ready to help answer questions as well in case I miss any of your questions. Today, talking about turtles, the first thing to remember about turtles is that they are vertebrates, and we know this because they have a skull. We are lucky enough to have a snapping turtle skull with Montana Outdoor Science School. It's been with us for a long time. Someone donated it to us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the shells, the skull itself, and also just the general lifestyle of a turtle. Just like all other vertebrates, turtles have all five senses, of course. They have the sense of sight, smell, taste. They also have a sense of hearing, which is this little area here. And also, I'm missing one. Oh, I get their sense of touch. And that's actually throughout their whole body, including their shell, which is pretty neat. If you've ever heard how turtles can feel when they're being picked up by their shell, that is totally true. We'll get to that a little bit later when I get more into details about turtle shells. But the skull is really neat. It is glued together, which is not the worst, but it's a little unfortunate just because now we can't see an opportunity for these jaws to move how they would have moved in real life. But you can see this is a very different looking skull compared to the last skulls we've been looking at with canines and felines and everything in between, because there's no teeth. They just have this beak. They do have little ridges along their beak here, and that is good enough for them to be able to chomp down and break apart things, but they don't have the standard teeth that we see other mammals and other reptiles having had. Ooh, that brings up another subject. These are reptiles. They are not amphibians. That's a really big misconception I find for students as they are looking at our local turtle, Hercules, who is one of our animal ambassadors at the office. A lot of students will raise their hand and say he's an amphibian because he has soft skin. And that's true. He does have soft skin. Turtles typically don't have the big hard scales that we see on other reptiles. Instead, their scales are all located on their shells. Their skin can have some scales, but it is a much more leathery type of skin underneath those few scales that they may have on their skin. All turtles are a little different too. Some of them may have absolutely the softest skin, especially for a species in Montana called the spiny soft shell turtle. They have a very leathery feeling skin, very leathery shell, versus if you looked at a snapping turtle, it's going to have a lot more of a hard outer layer both on the shell and on their skin, but still got the soft skin. So this is the skull. This is a snapping turtle skull, just like I mentioned before. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask them as we're going about our little video here today. Let me move along to the shells over here. I've got a few species of shells. I've got two painted turtle shells, which are native Montana species. I should mention the snapping turtle is also a turtle found in eastern Montana. And then I have one over here. This one is actually a map turtle shell, which is not native to Montana, but nevertheless it is still pretty cool to see. Our turtle in the office, Hercules, he is a map turtle. He's bigger than what this shell is here. He's probably 5 to 6 inches in length on his shell. So if you added another 2 inches or so onto here, he would be about that big. The reason they call map turtles though, on their shells, do you see all these little lines here? These look very much like topography lines on a map. Topography lines help define elevation on a map. Each line represents so many feet up or down, and so you can actually see where mountains are, where canyons are on a map. And the map turtle has very similar looking little lines on their shell here. So that's something to note. You can also notice on his belly, it's quite white. It's not got a lot of patterns here. There's some patterns on the outside, of course. There's some patterns over here and on the top side, but the belly itself is pretty white. And now let's compare that to a painted turtle shell. The painted turtle shell, I have a juvenile shell here. This one's not quite full grown, but now check this out. It has these lines that make this outline all across and kind of go in and out like a wave all around. And that is one of the big features of a painted turtle. There is also that they have a ton of color on their shells. However, because this one is a deceased turtle, and because it's probably been found in the wild, it's been in the wild for a while, it's been sun bleached for quite a bit, it's actually not going to have that same coloration that it used to. Maybe if it had been fresh, if it had been kept indoors after it had been gotten rid of all the soft tissue, it might have stayed colorful, but because it has been so long that this turtle has been deceased now, it's no longer going to be as colorful as it once was. But they come in bright reds. There's a little bit of yellow on painted turtle shells. They're quite pretty, and we have a lot of those in the Gallatin area. We have plenty in any little wetland zones, any little riparian zones, any place where there's water flow, and especially ponds. This is where you'll find painted turtles around here. The snapping turtle, we will not really find where we are in Gallatin Valley, nor will we find the spiny soft-shell turtle. Those are typical of eastern Montana, and their populations are not quite as prevalent as painted turtle shells. The top of the shell is nothing too fancy, but I did learn today that turtles tend to have 13 scales, or 13 scutes is what they're called, on this upper part right here, not including the rim. And so I actually tested it out. I was a little wary when I saw that fact. I was like, is that true or not? And then I counted, and true enough, it is 13 little shells, or 13 little scutes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 there on the top. And this is apparently true for all turtle species, is what I have learned. I am still a little wary of that fact. If you guys have a turtle at home, or if you have a turtle shell, count those scutes on that upper part, excluding the rim, and tell us if you have found 13 on that shell, because I'm curious. I want to know what people's experience is with that. Moving along to the bigger shell here, it's the same thing. So this one's a little bit more worn out, but you can still see the ridges where each scute was. And let's count it again. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. But then look over here on this corner. Could that be 14th? I'm not entirely sure. It could, it couldn't be. It's hard to say. Nevertheless, there is clearly 13 defined regions on this shell. I did this too with the little map turtle shell, and my numbers got a little bit wonky. It wasn't quite 13, so I'm not sure if the theory holds up entirely true. If we count here, there is, well, it's hard to say actually, because take a look at this one right here. Those might be 1 or 2 scales. I thought it was 2 earlier, so I counted up. I went down the middle first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe I'll let you guys take a look there. Count it up yourselves, see if you're curious. And then if we count down the sides, I thought that looked like one on its own. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Uh-oh, we're already going to go over the number. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Well, that's way more than 13. So maybe it doesn't hold true. But this is also a younger turtle. You can tell based on the size alone. And you can also tell it's a younger turtle because of these bigger prominent ridges along its spine. This isn't true for all turtle species, but with the map turtle, those spines tend to mean that it's younger. And maybe that number of scutes on the top part of the shell too has to do with it being number. Who knows? Like I said, if you guys have a shell at home, or you have a turtle at home, I'm super curious. I want to know what your count is for that. While I've got y'all here, let's talk about what the shells are actually made out of. So this bigger one has a really great example of what is underneath the shell, and it's just straight up bone. You can see over time this shell has been laid out to the elements, and it has exposed that bony structure with it. On top of the bony structure is the softer keratin covering that covers the whole shell. And the keratin is the protein that makes up hair, makes up nails. It is the thing that helps with protecting the shell further. If you have any questions, once again, feel free to type that in. Excuse me, everybody. Let me see. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Welcome back. So the turtle shells, like I was saying, they are covered in a keratin protein. They have these little, and this one's got some good examples, but the smaller map turtle has some even better examples. Like all reptiles, turtles do shed, and it comes in the form of their shell and these scutes individually shedding these little, almost thin, brittle, I guess they're still just called a scute, but they will actually shed the old ones as they grow ever slightly bigger, and there's a fresh new layer underneath that eventually in turn will grow, and it'll be a continuous cycle. It's harder to tell on this big one, but there are some edges on it where the scute is coming apart from the shell itself. If this turtle were alive, we wouldn't see this white bone underneath. We would see another fresh layer of the keratin underneath, but we can really see the scutes as they might have been shedding in real life on this map turtle here. You can see that's what these are that are coming and peeling apart from the shell. I'm not going to pull them apart because I think they're a really cool piece of this that we can show to folks. And I was going to show you guys also on the painted big turtle that it has a pattern on its belly. So again, this is the map turtle without the pattern on its belly. It's the little one, has ridges along the spine. This one is also a painted turtle. This one's a juvenile, and this one's the bigger of the painted turtles, and this is about an adult size of a painted turtle. They won't get a whole lot bigger than this. Females are bigger than males, partly due to them being the ones that produce eggs. They need to be capable of getting enough nutrition and enough material in order to produce those eggs. But even though this one is an older shell, one that's been exposed to the elements, like I said, you can still see the painted turtle pattern on the belly. If you follow these little lines along, you can see it's kind of like that wave pattern again, goes in and out, in and out. And if this turtle had been alive, or if we'd found this when this was still a fresh shell, we would see a ton of color on the belly. But because it's just simply so old, we cannot see those colors quite like they were in life. I wanted to show you all this too. I mentioned how turtles are vertebrates. They do have a backbone, and I remember when I was a kid, I don't know about y'all, but I saw a ton of cartoons where turtles were always taking their shells off when they went to bed, like it was like a piece of armor that they could just be in and out of, and that's just not true. I had a huge misconception as a child, because when you actually look at the inside of a turtle shell, you guys see that? That is the spine of the turtle, and it is directly connected to the inside of its shell. And because the skeleton is all connected together, we end up seeing that everything is a part of the shell. It's not that the turtle lives inside of its shell, the turtle is its shell. He is absolutely every part of that shell. It's a little harder to see inside this one. There is a spine. I'm not sure if I can get you guys to see it on the video, but you can see the dried remnants of the turtle skin on the outside, which I think is always very cool. It's kind of like mummified at this point. But the little map turtle shell over here has a really good example. Oh yeah, check that out. It's like the spine is a part of the shell there, and what would be our ribs is just ridges on the inside of that turtle shell. It's almost like if you could imagine your rib cage became your shell. This is what it is like for a turtle. Turtles are different than tortoises in that they are semi-aquatic. They are not fully aquatic. If they were fully aquatic, they'd be able to stay in the water as long as they could. Or as long as they wanted. They'd be able to breathe underwater. Turtles do need to come up for air still, and they do need to lay their eggs on land. So that's what makes them only semi-aquatic, only partly living in the water. With turtles and tortoises, turtles tend to have more of a flat, very sleek dome on top of their shell. You can see it especially with this juvenile over here. Versus on a tortoise, they will have a huge dome on top of their shell. I'm not entirely sure why that is. My theory, though, is mobility-wise and protection. A tortoise is not going to be nearly as fast as a turtle is in the water. Tortoises need, therefore, more protection. Perhaps that's a reason for their great big domes. Versus on a turtle, they need to have a nice, sleek, mobile body that can zip through the water. If you've ever seen turtles move in the water, they are quite fast. It's pretty impressive just how quick they can be. So they might need those slimmer shells just for better mobility through the water. I did a little research too into the diets of these animals, and it kind of ties in, I think, to their mobility. So with turtles, they tend to be more omnivorous creatures overall. They can eat insects, they can eat fish, they can eat the eggs of other animals, especially aquatic eggs that they find in the water. And they are also more than capable of eating plant material as well. So this may be reeds or weeds in the water. This may be grasses that grow in the water. They're definitely more than capable of being on an herbivore-like diet. However, if you go to a tortoise is not an animal that is eating any kind of meat. I'm pretty sure they're strictly herbivores. And if you think about how they move, that may be the reason why. Tortoises are not moving very fast. They're land animals. They don't go in the water. They can't get around too quickly. Plants are going to be an easy thing for them to find and to eat. Versus a turtle, who is a little bit more mobile, who can go super fast in the water, is going to be perfectly capable of being a predator to some types of animals, especially a snapping turtle. Snapping turtle is an ambush predator, much like our snake Jade that I own. Jade is a Dumeral's boa from Madagascar, and she waits to ambush things. Snapping turtle does the same thing. Snapping turtle will wait and lie low in water, wait for something to come close enough to it, and then will pop his head out really quickly to snap up something, which is pretty impressive. This is about the size of an adult snapping turtle head. I am sure they can get bigger, but this is a good representation of what they would look like fully grown in the head area. And again, this one over here is my fully grown painted turtle shell. It's not quite as colorful as it would have been when it was alive, unfortunately. That's just kind of the nature of having artifacts from animals that have been around for a long time. But this is a full-grown one. The females grow bigger than the males, partly due to the need to produce eggs. Females will lay their eggs come June and July, and they'll lay them on beaches, or they'll lay them several hundred yards that are away from water sources but are still soft soil. They want to be able to lay their eggs so that the eggs will be protected, but they won't be, they potentially won't freeze over in the winter time, because sometimes the eggs, this is crazy, sometimes the eggs will hatch within a month to 3 months, but sometimes the eggs will just winter over instead of hatching in the fall. So the babies will stay inside their eggs. They'll be in a state that's very slow, very metabolically it's very slow, and they won't hatch until the spring comes around the next year. So that was something I learned about painted turtles. Painted turtles also are able to stay underwater the entire winter, which is a crazy thing, I thought. They are moving around during the winter time. They will kind of hunker down underneath any place that has ice. As long as that pond does not freeze to the very bottom, that turtle is more than capable of surviving the winter. They'll stay underwater, they'll kind of hunker down near some mud. They might even go into the mud a little bit, but they are able to breathe through their skin. And this is how turtles share some characteristics with amphibians. Amphibians have the ability to breathe both through their lungs and through their skin, which I've always thought is really neat. And turtles can do the same thing. They can take oxygen out of the water through their skin. And because they're in a very cold area during the winter, they're in a cold climate, their metabolism's really slow. They don't need a lot of energy, and so they don't need a lot of oxygen either. Because they're moving so little, moving nevertheless, they do need some oxygen, just a very small amount of oxygen. If you have any questions about turtles, Please feel free to type that into the comments. I would love to hear from you guys, anything you have or are curious about. But that's about everything I have for y'all today regarding turtles. I'll do another little overview with the turtle shells that I do have. This one's a map turtle. Map turtles, they actually don't live in Montana. They are endemic to the eastern United States and eastern Canada. Basically everything on the eastern side of the Mississippi, roughly. This one's a juvenile. This one's not a full-grown one yet, but it does have little ridges, and I've read that potentially indicates it is a juvenile if it's got these little ridges on its top like that. It's called a map turtle because of these sweet little designs on its shell. It looks like a topography map, and a topography map is a map that shows elevation gain or elevation decline, shows where mountains, canyons are, and so the map turtle has similar looking lines as topography maps. These little things here that look different from the rest of its shell, this is actually the scutes, the individual scales of the shell starting to shed. When we take our turtle Hercules out at work, and we let him run around the office or let him run around outside, his shell will dry up a little bit, which is totally normal and natural. But the scutes on his shell, we've noticed, will start to peel up the edges, and that's how he ends up shedding eventually, is he lets his scales dry up enough. They will shed underwater, but I think it will take longer. Him being out of the water kind of accelerates that process. So this was clearly a turtle that was in the process of shedding its scutes, but it just didn't quite get to that time period. So that's the map turtle there, just a little guy. And again, you can see that spine inside to show that it is a vertebrate. Let me see if I can get my camera not to be fuzzy. Perfect. And then we've got a juvenile map turtle. This one's a really nice map turtle shell. It's very smooth, very nice. And they have this pattern on their belly. They also would have had a ton of color back when they were alive, but it's lost a ton of color because of that. I heard rumor that you could count 13 scutes on the top of a turtle shell. I'm curious if you guys find this true or not. We did a little count earlier. This one has 13. This one does not. This one has 18. This is just something I've read on the internet, and I would like to know if people have found it to be true with their turtle shells or their turtles at home. So there's 13 on this one. There might be 13 or 14 on this big one, unsure, but this one is a good example of an adult painted turtle. You can see the bone of the shell underneath the scutes here. Scutes are made of keratin, like I said. They are the same things that hair and nails are made out of, and turtles also are capable of feeling when something's touching their shell. It's just like your fingernails. If you touch the top of your fingernail, you can't feel anything directly on your skin, but you can tell that there's pressure there. You can tell that there's something touching the top of your nail, and it's the same thing for a turtle. We always like to tell kids that when we bring our turtle at the office out. I'll mention one last fun little fact. And it's just another piece of anecdotal evidence, but we, with our turtle Hercules at work, we'll bring him out to kids. We'll often bring them into a grassy area and let Hercules kind of roam in the circle of children. We'll have him sit cross-legged. And what I've always noticed about Hercules is that he will actually run or walk towards the downhill slope area. And what ends up happening is he always ends up being in front of the same kids, even if we try to take him, place him in front of other kids. But part of the reason I'm sure is that he, in his little reptile brain, has the instinct to go downhill because water goes downhill. And so I imagine he must be thinking to himself, I'm going to get to a safe place, I'm going to get to water, I'm going to go down the hill. So I've always thought that was pretty interesting of our turtle Hercules. That's everything I have for you guys today. If you have any further questions or you have some fun turtle pictures or facts, feel free to post those to Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel with Montana Outdoor Science School, and that channel has all of these live stream videos uploaded after we have seen them. We also every other week to kind of keep you guys up to date with new fun tidbits about your area. So tune in with us with Facebook or with YouTube, and we will see y'all next time. Thanks for being here.